Hey, it's Patch, and welcome back to another episode of Reading Reddit. Now, this time we're going to be reading through the r/ProRevenge subreddit. I hope all of these stories are interesting and engaging, unlike my voice. Thank you for listening, and let's move on to the first story. So this first story we have is called Thanks for the Year of Free Rent in Brooklyn. So a friend and I moved into this newly renovated apartment in Brooklyn. It's nice enough, but just about every one of the 14 units has some sort of weird problem. One unit had the hot and cold water mixed up. Flush a few times and get a heated toilet. One unit, none of the outlets are grounded. One unit, there are gaps around the windows. The problem in our unit was a leak in the air conditioner lines. The leak was probably at the roof, but we ended up with no AC. We call them, and it takes a month to get someone. He refills the lines, and a week later the problem comes back. We spend the summer getting the system topped up every week. At the end of summer, they decided that our repairs and all of the neighbors were getting too expensive, so they send us bills. Our bill was in the tens of thousands of dollars. Recharging that system weekly must have been expensive. They also start trying to charge every unit for any infraction, like $100 for every unit for a single scrap of paper found in a hole. The tenants all get together to have a little meeting. It turns out that they never got a certificate of occupancy for the building. The city had it on the books as a furniture warehouse. So collectively, we all just stopped paying them. Rent, fines, fees, nothing. We retain a lawyer and just live there. The company tried to get us out by cutting lighting and other services. We contacted the lawyer and the company would get fined and we'd get our lights back. They tried to change the main lock once, but we'd let the locksmith know what was going on, so he stopped. They didn't try it a second time. The first floor of the building was an off-track betting parlor. They were particularly noisy and obnoxious, so one resident called the health department over a moldy loaf of bread we found in the basement. One of my best memories was watching a bunch of guys in hazmat suits clear out the betting parlor so they could run tests. Eventually, they try to get the certs, but to do that they need to do inspections with the drywall removed. They tried to do it while we lived there, and the lawyer fought it for not being in a livable state. Finally, they realized they needed to get us out. If they got the C of O while we were still there, we'd owe back rent. They take us to court to get evictions. Our lawyer gets everything pushed back as far as he can, but finally we go to city court. The lawyer points out that they're trying to evict 14 units, but you can't evict more than 10 at a time. The court ejects the case. I don't think the lawyer gets a single word in. I don't think their lawyer gets a single word in. So now we get a county court date for an ejection instead of an eviction. Again, our lawyer pushes it back as much as he can, but eventually we have to go. The court agrees to eject all of us, but sees the evidence of lighting and lock tampering. The court asks our lawyer what would be a reasonable time frame, and our lawyer asks for 4 months. The judge gives us 6. Everyone stays until the last month. At the end of all of it, we got to live in a newly renovated apartment in a trendy area of Brooklyn for free for a little over a year. Was it really free though? Just think of all those problems they had to deal with, and all this stuff they had to do. Sure, they didn't have to pay money, but they basically paid with their time and mental stability of having to deal with not living in suitable conditions. Anyway, that's the end of this story. Let's move on to the next one. So this next story that we have is called Roommate Lacks the Will to Get Up on His Own. I see a lot of hot-blooded revenge stories lately where huge shitstorms get stirred up and someone gets fired or arrested. My story is cold-blooded revenge, where a very small and deliberate action makes my victim lose out. My very first semester at college, I had a roommate who was a pain in the butt. He made up honor code rules to tell us we weren't allowed to watch movies or listen to music he didn't like. Didn't realize food wasn't his. Stayed up past curfew with friends over being loud. Didn't help clean the dorm for inspections, and had a consistent holier-than-thou attitude because of his religion. I'm pretty calm, and I rarely get even, but after a semester of his nonsense, I had no issues with revenge. He was going to study music, but failed the entrance audition to an important class, and needed to take another 2 credits in order to keep his scholarship. So he joined the social dance class I was taking at 7:45 a.m. every other day. A couple weeks in, he decides to set his alarm to 6:15 a.m., 15 minutes before I get up. My morning habit is very tight. Wake at 6:30, shower, change, eat, and walk to class, arriving with 5 minutes to spare. His morning habit is allow the alarm to play for 5 to 10 minutes before turning it off, go back to sleep until I finish showering, and come back into the room, then get up, shower, and leave just a few minutes after me, arriving right as class starts. I deal with it for a while, and he even acknowledges that it's probably annoying and I should turn it off since I don't get up anyway. He doesn't. I figured I could use his habit against him. He was essentially Pavlov, trained to wake up when I came into the room. So in the last 2 weeks of semester, I changed my routine slightly. I would eat before showering. That made it so I came into the room just a few minutes before leaving, with just enough time to walk to class. He, not realizing it was so late, took his shower and arrived at class with only a few minutes left, getting an absent for the day. The dance department has a very strict policy that 4 unexcused absences is an automatic fail. My roommate doesn't remember this rule. He continues to rely on me coming into the room to wake him up. He continues being absent for the last 4 days of class. His first semester report card gets an F, which brings his GPA too low to get his scholarship for next year. I hope you enjoyed. I know I did. So now, moving on to the next story, which is titled, Want to Screw Me Over and Berate Me on the Job? 2 can play at that game. Fair warning, this might be kind of long, but I promise the payoff is worth it. For some context, I worked at a restaurant as a prep cook for around a year or so. It's a popular chain, but I'm not going to hint at the name. Anyways, my job was essentially just prepping ingredients, dealing with small stuff like salad and desserts, and keeping the line cooks stocked up. It's not a crazy stressful job, but I have a severe anxiety disorder that I wasn't medicated for at the time. So sometimes I would reach my limit and need to go cool down for like 5 minutes or so. So while I'm working there as a prep cook, there are multiple managers, each for specific things. They are very kind and fair to me, but there's one that seems to actively make it his job to put me down without actually verbally doing so. I'll call him David. That's not his real name though. That's just for this story. David is the definition of a middle school bully in the body of a 50-year-old heavy smoker. He would constantly cut corners and not do stuff that he would go crazy if we didn't do, like not cleaning up after himself, leaving his drink right by the grill line, fucking around on his phone while on the clock, etc. And he was never called out on it to his face because the people that were aware of it either didn't want to start a grudge with the manager or were just apathetic to the situation. However, despite all of this annoying stuff, that's more or less just tedious to deal with. This is where it gets bad. For the first month or so that I was working there, all of my managers, including David, were really nice and understanding towards me. Eventually, the general manager noticed when I was having a freakout during a particularly stressful shift, and I had to explain to her about my condition. She was incredibly understanding and told me that if I didn't want everyone knowing about it, she would just tell the other managers and shift leaders so they would cut me some slack. I agreed and thanked her profusely, and everything was relatively fine for a while. Then David drops the nice guy routine. At first, I chalk it up to my anxiety and distrust of others, and that I must just be interpreting his actions wrong. But that doubt goes away fast after he ramps up his game. It starts with small things, like David getting visibly irritated with me for very small mistakes, but then quickly turns harsher and legitimately malicious, doing things seemingly on purpose that will fuck me over, micromanaging everything I'm doing, and berating me for even the most minuscule mistakes, saying things like, "Come on, Giles, you should know by now. You should know this by now. Use your head for once." The worst example of this treatment that I can remember is when we were working during a particularly busy lunch rush. I don't remember exactly how the conversation went, but it was something like this. David: "Giles, it's the lunch rush. What are you doing?" Me: "I'm doing my orders. I just have a lot right now, so I'm a little backed up." David: "I don't care about the tickets. I'll get someone else to take care of them. I need you to make more chicken." I'm a little irritated at the time, but I don't know him well enough to be confident that arguing wouldn't end with me getting disciplined or something, along with my anxiety that was starting to develop into a panic attack. So I just turned around wordlessly and started to do what he said. I shit you not, less than 5 minutes later, David comes storming over to me, fuming. David: "What the hell are you doing, Giles?" Me: I'm doing what you told me to like 5 minutes ago." David: "Don't you see all those tickets at your station? Why the hell aren't you dealing with them?" Me: "Because you told me to go make more chicken, and that you'd get someone else to handle it." I'm not proud to say that at this point in my life, I was a giant pushover and a coward. I could not handle confrontation whatsoever, and I would actively avoid it by any means necessary. At this point, I'm trying not to cry, and I start to get lightheaded, and I feel the telltale signs of the beginning of a panic attack. David sees how distressed I am, and he looks even more irritated. He scoffs and says, "Fine, I'll take care of your mess." After I finish my task, I run into the bathroom, lock the door, and sit on the floor to try and collect myself and calm down. The rest of the shift, he just gives me glares or irritated looks. Now that all the law is out of the way, here's where the revenge comes in. Chiefly among the things that David did to me was actively keeping me from leaving at the end of my shift, by using whatever he could to do so. My record is 3.5 hours longer than I was supposed to be there, and it was because of him. So how it worked was that regardless of our position, servers, dishwashers, cooks, etc., we weren't allowed to leave until a manager said we could, and then had to wait to be walked out by someone with the authority of at least a shift leader. Regardless of if our work was done and everything was clean and we were supposed to leave 5 minutes ago, if a manager wanted, they could force you to stay and either do literally nothing. They sure like to chew you out if that was the case, or do the work of someone else. On one particularly bad day, I was having bad anxiety and grasping onto quitting time as my light in the darkness. The time for my shift came to an end. As I was just finishing up everything I was assigned, and I see David. "Hey David, I'm all finished up. Can you walk me out?" He laughs at me and says, "Are you crazy? If I can't go home, neither can you." Keep in mind that my shift ended 5 minutes ago, and his was going to likely run him another 4 or 5 hours. Again, being the pushover that I was, I just took it and went to the bathroom to try and cool down before I melted down in front of everyone. I had to stay for an extra 2 hours for no reason, and would constantly either not tell me to do anything indirectly, or force me to do menial tasks that weren't even part of my job. And David would constantly either not tell me to do any. Eventually, this treatment played a factor in me using the small bit of courage I had left, writing a note saying that I quit and that I was really sorry and that it wasn't their fault at all, and I walked out after telling the co-workers that I liked goodbye. Fast forward 5 or 6 months later, I was unemployed and needed a job. Every position that I applied to was entry level, but I got no calls. After a month of this, I realized that I had to eat crow and try to get my job back at the restaurant. I eventually did so, but came back on as an overnight janitor. The fact that I'd been working completely alone with no one else around for most of my shifts, combined with the fact that my anxiety was miles better and how I'm practically a different person now because of this. This was way better than my previous position. This is where the revenge kicks in. While I was training with a guy who'd been working the position for a long time, he mentioned that the manager that's closing can only leave after everything on their checklist was done, and the opening manager had to stay until all of their stuff was done. I didn't think much of this until I started mentally piecing together the checklists they had to do. And over a few weeks of just watching them do their stuff while I worked, then finally it clicks, and I get the dumbest, most petty idea to get back at David possible. After I put this plan together, I decide to actually do it. I wait until shifts where David closes, and I strike. After people slowly start to clock out, and it's only a few people left, David constantly asks for help with stuff that I know is on his checklist, and I always make up an excuse to not be able to help. Mostly, I would, man, but if I do, I'll be way behind on my stuff. This is a lie. I have a lot of time to spare after I finish my checklist. I start half-assing specific things that will make him have to stay longer to finish, but do it in a way that there's no way he could call me on doing it purposefully. David is supposed to leave around 11 every night. I make sure that he doesn't step foot outside the kitchen till 2 in the morning. The cherry on top is that the janitor for the night has to walk out the manager for some weird reason. Because of this, when I know that David is starting to get ready to go, I make sure to take a long bathroom break, or hide somewhere for as long as I can before it's obvious what I'm doing. The final part of this is the time when he jokingly complained about how long it's been taking him to finish every night, and how I should try and help him finish more. I don't miss a beat, and with a smile I say, but if I do that, I'll have to stay later to finish my stuff, and if I can't leave, neither can you. To this day, I still do this sometimes. So the TLDR, one of my bosses treats me like shit, and I end up in a position where I have him by the balls. Thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and I don't know, share it if you feel like it, I guess. You don't have to share it though. That's optional.